Hello and welcome to another edition of these rapid reaction videos where I get to talk for 20-30 minutes to people who are in the news and give a little bit more time to discuss issues rather than the soundbite culture that we often get on the news. And I'm really delighted today to be joined by the Labour MP for Swansea East, Carolyn Harris. Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, Tim.
And you've been MP now since 2015, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's been a long 6 years.
Well, it's been an incredible 6 years, to be honest. And that's really why I wanted to talk to you, because I've got a friend in Parliament who I was at university with, Robert Halfon. And, he was among a group of people, Nikki Aitken, who's now, I think, a friend of yours on the Tory benches in Westminster. Sajid Javid, of course, is the Health Secretary. David Burrows, former MP for Enfield Southgate. And they're all amazing people I was at university with. And Robert is certainly up there for me because as a backbencher, he had a brief period as an education minister, but as a backbencher, he's achieved huge things. Now, there's one thing, though, to be a Tory backbencher during a period of Tory government and achieve quite a lot. You've been a Labour backbencher during a period of Tory government, and you've achieved quite a lot. So, an enormous amount. And I wanted really to talk to you about what you've done, how you've done it, and what it says about the state of British politics. So here we go. So let's start with, perhaps is the hardest thing for you to talk about, but is your successful campaign to pay for children's funerals. And you lost your own son in a road traffic accident. And tell us if you can, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot with this, but tell us what happened and why you fought a campaign which was really your first big parliamentary victory.
Yeah, well, I lost Martin when he was 8, and at the time I was a barmaid and a dinner lady, and my husband worked on the railway. He was working on the tools, so we were just a normal, youngish couple with 2 small kids. We could just about afford to scrape together the money to go and have a caravan holiday somewhere in West Wales. We lost Martin, and this bill turned up for a funeral, and it was so far out of our league in terms of the cost. And
give us a brief idea of how big it was at the time, how much it would be in money today.
Well, it probably equates to about £4,000 today, because that's roughly how much it costs for a funeral. And just before we had the bill, in Wales, we got this habit of when somebody's had a bereavement, the neighbours and friends turn up with something. They'll come with a bag of tea bags, a tin of biscuits, a jar of coffee. We just don't know what to do to make things easier, so we just turn up with things. And when you lose a child, that is amplified. David's mates in the pub just didn't know what to do, and they'd done a whip round. So we had the bill. I never looked what was in this envelope, and I went to the drawer and I looked, and there was £1,000 in it, and I needed to find 1,750 plus. I'd always worn a gold St. Christopher crucifix around my neck. And when I had Martin buried, I'd insisted on Martin wearing that to be buried in. And David was really, my husband was really concerned that I didn't have my cross anymore, and I always wore mine. So he went to replace that. So we actually needed 1,850. So we opened the envelope and there was £1,000 in it.
Wow.
So then David went to the bank, explained the situation, and borrowed the other 850, which we then paid back as a loan. And we paid the bill, and that was that. And it was something that always bothered me, that I'm not alone. There's roughly 5,000 children a year pass away. Some will be stillbirth, some will be from natural causes, some will be because of accidents and tragedy. So it was something that always bothered me. And when I became an MP, one of the reasons I became an MP, Tim, and probably the biggest, most important reason, was that as someone who's from a normal, ordinary working class family and normal working class area, I knew that the platform of being an MP, having those letters after your name, opened so many doors, not just for other people, but for me in terms of what I can do to help other people. And I suppose you could say I've exploited those letters, because everything I've done have been because I've got those letters after my name. And I thought, right, this is my opportunity. And I'll never forget the time I mentioned it, because I can see the minister, Marcus, now, he's a whip now. He just didn't know what was going to happen. It was in a German debate. I didn't have a speech because I didn't need to. It was my story. Yeah. And I started talking, and I never forget the look on that poor man's face. He just was not expecting me to say what I said. And everybody, it was silence in the chamber. He was choked. And then from then, the response from the public was overwhelming. I had emails, letters, phone calls from parents saying that they'd had threats of the stones being removed from their child's grave because they couldn't pay the bill, that they'd had to borrow money.
That was threats from undertakers or something, was it? Because the bill hadn't been paid, or who was that?
It was that kind of thing. I don't think it was the undertakers. I think it was debt collectors. I think at some point the undertakers had passed it on to a debt collector. I heard stories of how, because I feel sorry for undertakers, because they are essential. They cannot say no, and yet they can't always be guaranteed to get their money. And I do feel for them. Yeah. And undertakers, in some cases, were having to ask families to undergo a credit check in order to be able to conduct the funeral, or suggest an environment funeral, which was a pauper's funeral back in my day. Yeah. And I just thought, this is so wrong for any parent, because you can't imagine how it feels to lose your child, and you can't imagine how long that grief and that black place hangs over you. It hangs over you forever. But after 2 years, at least I started to come out and started to re-engage with society. But to not have been able to pay Martin's funeral, and to have not been able to give him that last thing that I could ever give him and say I'd done it with all I could, with all my heart, would have been awful. And so I started asking, and I asked, and I asked, and I asked, and I was a bloody nuisance. I know I was. But I had people like, I think I first met IDS, Iain Duncan Smith on that one, who totally got what I was saying. People like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who, people in Swansea East would run in the opposite direction rather than have a conversation with Jacob Rees-Mogg. People who, they showed me at that point that in some issues, there is no politics, that we're all human beings, and that the relationships that we form outside of that chamber are the most important relationships. They're about the real people talking to the real people, and it's about the people who have the influence and the power. And at the time, it was David Gork. He was the Justice Secretary. He was phenomenally helpful. There was the wonderful Ed Agar, who was helping me to ask for things, which he shouldn't have done, I know, but he was suggesting what I should ask for.
Still a health minister, now a health minister anyway. Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there was Will Quince, who'd understood because he'd been in a similar position.
MP for Colchester, I think, Tory MP for Colchester.
Yeah. And then there was Theresa May, who was in the difficult position of
being was Prime Minister. She was at the Prime Minister at the time, yeah.
Yeah, she was the Prime Minister. And every time I got up in Prime Minister's questions, and there was times when John Burke was letting me have Prime Minister's questions when I wasn't bobbing up and down, when I really shouldn't have had.
He wasn't all bad then, because he's not, he's not the most favourite of speakers from a Tory perspective, but we'll let him off if he helped you once or twice.
He was brilliant with me, absolutely brilliant. And I think she knew what I was going to say, and her answers softened over time, and eventually they said, okay, yeah. And I did say in the last speech that I gave, it wasn't a speech, it was on a Prime Minister's question time. After it, I knew it was happening, and I wanted to thank her because, I just had tortured her. I had literally tortured the woman. I was writing to her all the time. I was, every time I had an opportunity to mention it to her, I was saying, please, please. And I thanked her, and I said, look, I know I've been impatient, and I know I've kept on. And she said in her response to me, sometimes you have to be. And, whatever anybody says about Theresa May, I will always hold that woman up and think that she gave me, but not just me, she gave thousands and thousands and thousands of parents the dignity of never having to worry about paying for the child's funeral, which is absolutely massive. Not for me to know that children are buried, and now an undertaker is not going to go through that terrible ordeal of turning up with a bill and a parent's face when they see how much it's cost.
Yeah.
I don't think unless you've been in that position, nobody will realise how special that is for me.
Absolutely.
So I'm very proud of that one. And I call it Martin's legacy. So my son lives on because of a Conservative government in this case.
A Conservative government working with a bloody difficult woman, if I may say so. But what was it? It was, first of all, it was a just cause, you know, a powerful cause. Second thing, it was being willing to work with people on the other side of the aisle. And the third thing I'm hearing is sort of perseverance, just keeping at it and not letting go. Was there any other ingredients that you think you brought?
I think emotion. I think it's very difficult for anybody to not listen to what happened to me. And my story was my story, but it spoke for thousands and thousands and thousands of parents who had different stories to tell, but the message was the same. You know, you go through this hell, and that is the one thing that any politician was in a position to do, which was to remove that hurt and that hurdle of not having the money to pay for a funeral. Now parents don't even think about it. The bill never arrives. And the undertaker,
when you go to an undertaker now, they say, obviously this is all taken care of, we get reimbursed by the government. Is that how it happens?
Exactly. I don't even know if they mention it. They just don't send a bill. It just doesn't happen. And I don't think I've realised, and I still don't think I've realised the impactfulness of that, because for me, it's like, well, I've done that, fine, you know, I'm really pleased, but I've done it. I don't think I've really understood how big that is out there, because I think when you achieve something, I'm not the kind of person who is very good at pushing themselves. I'm marvellous at pushing on other people's problems. When I've got one, I'm dreadful. I go to pieces. So I don't think I've understood how much that has meant to other people. But to me, it means everything. You know, if it wasn't for losing Martin, Tim, I wouldn't be doing this job, because that was that deciding moment in my life when I lost my son. I could have either have sunk into the depths, which some people do, and never have come out the other side, or you come out the other side thinking, I've gone through the worst possible thing I can go through. Now I have to turn my life around to make sure whatever I do from now on benefits other people and makes life a bit easier for those who are struggling. And that's what I do. And we've struggled, you know, we've had times when we couldn't afford to pay the gas bill and the electric bill and worried about how we're going to pay for Christmas. So everything I've done from there has been about helping other people. That sounds like I'm a do-gooder. I'm not a do-gooder. I just know that those 2 letters, MP, they open doors that you will not believe. Well, you would believe it, Tim, but people out there don't understand. If I phoned up someone and said, my name's Carolyn Harris, I want to feed 5,000 kids this summer, can I have some cheese and ham? They say this woman's insane. When I phone up now and say, this is Carolyn Harris MP, I'm doing my summer lunch club, I need ham and cheese for 5,000 kids, people say, where do you want to deliver to? That's the difference it makes.
Absolutely. You mentioned emotion as that 4th factor. How much is that tied up with you being a woman, Carolyn, as well? Do you think that makes... I'm slightly disappointed, by the way, your hair... Normally your hair is sort of more purple or more coloured.
I've gone grey. I'm going all gracefully. I've gone grey. I've gone grey, dyed grey. It's not really grey.
Well, look at me. I've got a badger look at the moment. I'm sort of grey at the sides, but I want it all to go as grey, I think, now. But
yeah, well, that's why I dyed it, because it was bits of grey. I dyed it grey. No, I went from being purple because I suppose one of the things was some of the abuse I've taken has been about the colour of my hair, and I think that played around in my mind a bit and thought, oh, and I don't want to think I give in to the abusers, but you do sometimes think, okay, well, that may lessen it then, because I can't help being fat, because that's another thing they love to target. But the purple hair, I could do something about. So I'm moving on.
Do you don't think the coloured hair was part of your sort of just being able to stand out? You know, there aren't, you know, women are minority in Parliament. People with coloured hair are even more of a minority. You don't think that helped you stand out a little bit when you've been fighting your campaigns? You've obviously... I
think, yes, my accent, mine. I don't talk posh. I don't do posh. I know I can't. Although I did take a phone call from someone not that long ago and put my telephone voice on because I thought it was really important, Tim Montgomerie. But no, I'm not very good at keeping up the posh. No, I just think I am what I am. I don't change. I am what I am here now. I might have a bit of lippy on in the chamber or in work and a bit of makeup, but I wear bright clothes, and I sort of try to embrace who I am, and what you see is what you get.
Yeah. And let's just briefly talk about your second big campaign. This is your second big campaign, which I sort of most remembered you for, actually, perhaps wrongly. I should remember you for what we've begun with. But I think what impressed me about this campaign was this was your campaign against the fixed odds betting terminals. And I think what impressed me particularly with this campaign was, unlike the first campaign where it was a big enough task, you had to persuade the government to fund this, you were taking on a very powerful industry that wanted to stop you. It was more of a fight of two gladiators, really. Tell me what got you into this campaign where people could sort of put £100 stakes on these terminals and lose huge amounts of money, and now has been banned again, a Labour backbenchers campaign under a Tory government. Well,
when I was first elected, you know what it's like. People come to see you and ask you to take on campaigns, something that they have an interest in. And I had loads of people coming to ask me, will you do this? Will you do that? And really wordy causes, but I can't take anything on which doesn't actually really grip me. It's got to be something that I can feel for. And they talked about betting shops and fixed odds betting terminals, and about the fact that you were only allowed to have 4 of these machines in every bookies. So bookies were actually what they call clustering. They were putting multiple shops in an area, and these areas were predominantly poor areas. And it got me to thinking about my own constituency and the areas where there were space to have a bookies. There were several of them, and thinking about the economics of that area and thinking, there's a point there. And I was interested in it, and interested in the backstory of, £100 every 20 seconds, 4 machines, phenomenal amount of money. But I thought, well, I need to think about this, because at that time I thought, no, I just want to do something now which affects my constituency. And it was coming up to Christmas, and I came back after London, and we were in the office, and a young boy came in, I'd say in his early 20s, and he said to me, and I can't remember now if he said he'd lost his wallet or for some reason his benefit had stopped, but he didn't have any money for Christmas. So we did the usual, see if he could get a social loan. They told us he's exhausted that facility. He said he had 2 children, he had no money for Christmas, he had no food, they had no toys or anything. So I thought, well, I can't have that. So I went to the local supermarket, and that was probably the start of my Christmas hamper campaign, because I realised there was loads of people like this. So I went to the local supermarkets and I said, look, can you please, again, using that title MP, can you put together a hamper? And they did. And there was a charity in Swansea which were providing toys for kids at Christmas who didn't have any toys, predominantly kids in care. And I asked them if they had anything left over, and they said they did, but they didn't know how age appropriate it was. And I said, look, at this stage, I don't care how appropriate it is. I just want those kids to have something to open on Christmas morning. Whatever toy it is, even if it's too young or too old, they will find a way of enjoying that on Christmas Day. So we done that, we delivered it up to his house, and thanks very much, and end of story, come away. And then on Christmas Day, I'd gone over to the pub to pick my husband up to bring him home for lunch. And this kid, I call him a kid,
did he need supporting on the way home, or he hadn't had too much?
No, he was fine. It was like, well, okay, yeah, he did. he needed a food to be able to eat the sprouts, but there we are. So, when I went in the pub, there was this boy was on the machine in the pub, and I thought, I spoke to him 3 times, and 3 times he just didn't even know I was there. And I thought, he's in a trance. So I said to my husband, does he come in here often? And he said, no, he's usually in the pub on the machines in there, but it's Christmas Day and they closed. So I started telling my husband the story, and he said, oh God, you want to see some of the boys in here? They're in that bookies all day. And he mentioned one person who'd been made redundant recently, and it had £21,000 redundancy that day, and by 4 o'clock has put £7,000 in a fixed odds betting terminal. And I'm like, hang on, what I was listening to and thinking, I need to make a connection to my constituency. This connection has just been handed to me on a plate. So I came back to London and we started talking about it. And in the beginning, we really struggled to get people interested. people, I think, like me, were thinking, oh, it doesn't really affect my constituency. But I started talking about it more, and then IDS came on board, and Jim Shannon came on board, and we started talking about it a bit more. And then Ronnie Cowan was involved, and all of a sudden we built up this momentum. Excuse the pun. And and before we know it, we had a really good team of the Secretariat and MPs who were being very vocal. And it was horrendous fight in the industry. And it's still horrendous because we're still fighting them over online and problem gambling and how they deal with problem gambling.
You've got a campaign at the moment to stop free bets, haven't you? Where you can begin betting without getting some free money to, your first stake. Yeah.
There's loads of things that go on. And, we argue constantly against the industry, and they usually resort to, derogatory comments about myself or IDS, or normally me, because they normally mention the word Methodist or Sunday school. So I reckon they're talking about me there because it's the Welsh thing, isn't it? And we won on the fixed odds betting terminals. We won, and then we sort of nearly lost it because the Chancellor, who was meant to put it into the budget, didn't put it into the budget.
That was Philip Hammond.
It was.
Yeah.
And we had a very useful backbencher by the name of Jacob Rees-Mogg then.
You mentioned him twice now. You'll be ruining his reputation amongst Tories.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Who wrote a very nice motion, which would have meant that we would have voted down the budget. And it looked like we were going to be able to vote down the budget. So Mr. Hammond very quickly came to his senses and introduced it a lot quicker. But, that's the power of working cross-party, isn't it? I wouldn't have achieved that if it wasn't for the Conservatives, who had the ability to get into the ear of the people making the decisions. I can do it in the chamber and I can do it through letters, but it's not very often I'd have an opportunity to whisper into Philip Hammond's ear. I mean, I never saw Philip Hammond. I think he was hiding from me, to be honest. But so, yeah, we've done it and we continue to do it. And we still are really active. And I would say probably one of the most successful APPGs is the gambling related harm, because I maintain that if we hadn't have had that fight then, we wouldn't be seeing the change in legislation on the 2005 Gambling Act, which I'm embarrassed to say was a piece of Labour legislation. And I'm appalled by it. But I think we have succeeded.
Every party makes mistakes. Even the Conservative Party probably has made some mistakes in the past. I don't think so, but it's possible.
I'll give you a list, Tim. I'll give you a list.
But what would you say, before we move on off the betting thing, what would you say? Because there'll be plenty of your constituents who enjoy a bet and bet responsibly. What do you say to them and the gaming industry, which is growing hugely fast now and has grown amazingly fast during lockdown, as more people have looked for something to do while they've been bored at home? But what would you say when they say, well, the vast majority of people who gamble do so responsibly and it's a bit of fun, and you're basically you're a joy killer who wants to take away their bit of fun? I don't think anyone watching you at the moment would regard you as a joy killer, the way you're full of life. But what do you say to that criticism?
Well, what I would say to that is that anyone who's able to go to any kind of gambling establishment, and I love a game of bingo myself, and they can walk away and their financial situation, their home situation, their health, their mental health, and their life, because that's the big one, is people are taking their life. If they can walk away from that and they don't feel the need to compulsively go back to it, then I got no problem with gambling at all. I'm not anti-gambling. My issue and IDS's issue is around, though, that there may be a minority, but that minority is growing, and that minority spend far more than the majority put together spend on gambling. The amount of money that they spend, which on many occasions is not theirs to spend, or it will literally be their homes that they are mortgaging in order to gamble, or payday loans, which they stealing, they borrowing, they lying. It's a hidden addiction. They're not able to. If someone's an alcoholic or a drug addict, you can see something. With gambling, you can't, and the first you know about it. And to give you a true story, I was talking to a lady just last week whose husband had returned to problem gambling, after abstinence during lockdown. He'd been furloughed and he was at home and he'd returned to problem gambling. And he'd been given free bets continually. And he just got in deeper and deeper and deeper.
These would have been a series of free bets from different companies, would it? So that he could access different sites, or how would it work?
I think most of them were from one company, actually,
Really?
because he had an account with them and he was getting free bets. And she'd only found this out after he's passed away, when she had access to his phone. But he was betting quite a lot of money. He was taking payday loans. He was spending money they didn't have to spend. And his last contact on his phone, for me, were very poignant, because he had bought a rope.
He had what, sorry?
He's bought a rope.
Bought a rope, oh my goodness.
Rope.
Yeah.
And he'd had an email from the betting company saying he hadn't deposited any money for like 5 or 6 hours, and that they weren't going to give him any free bets until he'd put some of his own money into his account. And then he went missing. And the next thing she knew, the police were knocking her door and they'd found him hung in the woods. So those two things together tell you that, for me, was a really powerful argument as to why we have to make sure that wherever the Gambling Act says, it looks at this targeting of vulnerable people, because they have the data gathering information. They know how much money these people are spending. They know how unlikely it is that person has got that residual income. If someone is gambling thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds in a short space of time, they are not going to have that money to hand to be able to do that. It's coming from somewhere. Yeah. But so it's a passionate campaign, because it comes along with it such terrible, tragic stories. So I am not a Sunday school prohibitionist. I'm not a Methodist who's looking to bring everybody down to church on a Sunday to sing hymns and to have no fun at all in life. All I want, and all IDS and Jim Shannon and all the guys on the APPG want, all we want is that to allow people to gamble, no problem with that. But that section of society who are not able, and it's not their fault, Tim. No. They are not responsible. The product is addictive. Until they realise that the product is the problem and not the individual, these people have developed mental health problems. These people are using gambling as self-medication. No, these people are not able to control how they gamble. It's no good blaming them and saying, well, it's up to them how much they gamble. They have lost control. Whilst they're gambling, they have lost control. And we have to accept that it's our role in society is to make it safer for them. And that's what I want to see legislation doing. And that's the route that we're pushing for.
One of your secrets of how you operate, to me, seems to be face-to-face exchanges with MPs. That must have been obviously more difficult while Parliament is subject to all social distancing measures. But have you had the opportunity to meet face-to-face with representatives of the gambling industry as well? Have you been able to, I forget the name of the lady in Stoke who's made all the money from gambling, but have you sat opposite these people and made these sort of human, not outside of a select committee framework or something? Have you had that opportunity?
No, well, we have met, we've met some of the leading lights, if you like, from the different gambling companies, but that was during the FOBT campaign, and it was in an APPG setting, and I actually cried at the end of it, because I get really ate up in these meetings when people are telling me things I know to be, if not untrue, then certainly twisted to suit that person's narrative. And I promised myself I was going to be good. I'd said, I'm going to be good, I'm going to be calm through this. And we met with the representatives of these companies, and in the room with us were the people who'd been affected. So I was asking them questions about the individual cases. Unbeknownst to the people from the industry, they didn't know that the people around us were the ones whose stories I was asking about. And they just came up with these answers or whatever. In the end, I just said, look, everything you've said, the people in this room are on the receiving end of what actually happened. And then I started to cry. So, because I do get quite emotional about it. So I have, not now, we don't get any communication. Well, we were having a lot of Twitter communication, shall we say, from people involved in the industry that wasn't very polite, but not face-to-face. I mean,
Twitter not polite? I don't understand what you can be talking about.
Where some people shouldn't tweet after they've had a pint on a Saturday night.
twunking, I think it's called, isn't it?
It's not a good thing, is it? So
No.
I just don't engage on Twitter with them now at all. At one point I used to sort of retaliate, and then I thought, why am I wasting my time? You know, it's not, I'll do it through legislation. And interestingly enough, they still don't want to come and meet us. They still want to send sort of letters telling us that they've done this and they've done that. And I just, you know, I just see them as they're a nuisance. That's all I see them as now, because they're in denial. They say I'm in denial, but I know they are. And I've got the evidence of the people who have been damaged behind me. And they've got the industry who've made vast profits behind them. And that's the problem.
We're talking about Twitter and social media. You were recently sort of screenshot in the House of Commons looking down at your mobile phone. And it could look like you were having a snooze, and if you were being uncharitable. And you faced a lot of abuse, including, I think, in your constituency on social media for that false representation. But some good came out of it as well, didn't it? In terms of you got some unexpected support, so which I think reflects where you've been as an MP. Yeah,
I did. The first two people who actually came out on Twitter and said this was not true, I was there, and given a little short version of their interpretation, with two female Tory MPs, Felicity and the lovely Nikki Aiken, who's a friend, and I was really grateful for them. And then all of a sudden, my phone was going insane. So the Tory Women had got together and they'd sent me, all of them had sent me texts and messages, and even Allegra Stratton got my phone number from the lovely Tracy Crouch and contacted me to say how sorry they were the position I was in. And I thought, yeah, that they're the people that really matter, the people I work with, and the people who know me, you know, that's a load of nonsense. But, you know, it just makes you think, if that's entertainment for people to sit there. There was one guy even actually said about what I had on, it degenerated into what I wore, and I thought I looked nice on the day, but there we are. And he said, you should wear what the men wear in the chamber. Oh. And I said, what, including a shirt and tie?
Pinstripe suit?
Never come back on that. I mean, madness. Who, in all seriousness, if you don't understand it, don't get involved in it, isn't it? That would be my answer. But people just pile on. It's insane. But I that was a time, it was really tough time, but I was heartened that so many, and not just the women, no, a lot of the men, but I'm quite friendly with Robert Buckland, and I mentioned IDS and Simon Hoare. I know I'm quite friendly with a lot of people.
Do you ever get into trouble from people in Labour for these friendships you have with the Conservatives, the evil Tories like me, Carolyn?
Not from the sensible people, but there are certain people of a certain leaning in my party who think that you should never even communicate with anyone from the Conservative benches, and you could never class them as a friend, and you can't trust them, and they're this and they're that. And I would say to them,
that's more from the Corbyn wing, is that fair, or would that be unfair?
Yeah,
right, yeah.
And I would say to them, well, look at what I've achieved working cross-party, and tell me that I've done something wrong, because, and you know, we're human beings, we're not automated. We don't go in a cupboard at the end of the day. We go home to our families, we go home to our children, and you know, I just cannot believe that people cannot see that just because you're a politician of one colour, that you have to argue with a politician of another colour. That happens in the chamber, you know this, Tim. This is theatre. PMQs is a pantomime. The debates in the House of Commons, they bring out an issue, and you can argue in that chamber with the opposition or with the government. But once you leave that chamber, you go back to being a human being. You wouldn't go up to somebody in a cafe in town and slag them off just because they didn't believe in you and your politics. You have to treat people with respect, and that's all I've done, is treat. I speak to everybody and I treat to everyone exactly the same. You know, I'm not very posh, as I've said, and I probably would bump into Robert Buckland. I'd be quite likely to say, all right, love, how's it going? Because that's what I do, you know. And he'll say, I'm all right back, how are you? Because he's Welsh, he gets it, you know.
Is there a Welsh mafia in the House of Commons? I'm beginning to worry that there might be, with you and Nikki Aiken, and she's another friend.
And Robert Buckland.
Yeah.
Simon Hoare. Everybody wants to be Welsh sometimes. There's a lot of Welsh there on the Tory benches, and it does, I think it helps with us building up relationships, because I think we have that affinity. But in saying that, my most staunch friend in the House of Commons on the Tory benches is Iain Duncan Smith, and he has literally supported me in my work from the time I went in there. And if somebody said to me before I became an MP that I would be defending Iain Duncan Smith, I'd have said, you are insane. But I got to say, especially the work that the CSJ do, I am so proud to do anything for the CSJ. I love the people there. I love the work they do. And they are responsible for one of my lovely members of staff, because I met her at the CSJ Awards when she was receiving an award for the Amy Winehouse Foundation. And Mel had a serious problem with alcohol. She'd gone through the system. I met her at the CSJ Awards. She now works for me, and she's an absolute talent. She's written a book about her addiction. She's done Radio 5 podcasts about it. And she is phenomenal. If it weren't for the CSJ, I wouldn't have met her. So I'm forever grateful to them.
Well, it's reciprocated, I can tell you, because they helped fix up this interview with us today, as you know. And I always know I have to be careful in my questioning with you, because if I upset you, I knew that Iain Duncan Smith and Andy Cook, who runs the CSJ, would boil me alive, I think, if I'd upset you. So, and we're going to meet for lunch soon, aren't we, all together? So
yeah.
I don't know whether you know my history with Iain Duncan Smith, but he's forgiven me, I think, now. But I joined him as Chief of Staff in his last 2 months of leader. And within 2 months, I brought him down. That's the story he tells. But on the night of his loss as Tory leader, we went to a restaurant in Kensington, and we wrote out a plan for the establishment of the Centre for Social Justice. And lots of leaders have got monuments or libraries in France or America, but Iain's legacy, I think, is the CSJ, and it's wonderful that you're involved in it. Let me give you a final minute to make do some party politics, because I've loved this interview, because I think for those people who don't think that MPs can work across the aisle, you are a shining example that it can be done. But you are a Labour MP. You believe in Keir Starmer. Tell viewers why Keir Starmer should be the next Prime Minister, and we should get rid of Boris Johnson, just so that you can reassure any Labour watchers that you are still authentically red in underneath all this bipartisan.
I am. Well, I'm not going to tell the country to get rid of Boris Johnson, because I think at this moment in time, Boris Johnson's doing that all on his own. Thank you very much. He doesn't need me to add problems.
I'd agree with that. With that.
But in terms of Keir, I mean, I met Keir the day that I came into the House of Commons. I heard a lot about him before then, and I met him, and I just knew that he was going to be the leader of the Labour Party. He is visionary, although people haven't had an opportunity to see that. He is consummate professional. He's a great performer, but deep down, he's a very principled man, and his heart is in the right place. He's a dear friend of mine, but he, like me, would understand that the only way we're going to get anything done is by working, especially through the pandemic. I think he proved that don't throw stones, throw suggestions, and let us work together to come to an end to this terrible position. Now that the pandemic is coming to an end, we have our conference coming up, and I think people will see a different Keir in that his vision, he's ready to put out his vision now about how we go forward as a party. But, politicians at the end of the day are only as good as the teams behind them and the people that they represent. And I'd like to think that as one of Keir's staunch supporters, he knows I'm behind him, and he knows that I will always stand up for him and do what is right for him, because I know what my constituency needs, and my constituency is no different to any other. We've all got problems, we've all got issues, and all politicians, regardless of the colour of them, need to be able to solve the problems of their constituents. And if that means working with the Tories, then I'll work with the Tories.
The way you Labour people have a way of saying Tories, though, there's always still a bit of menace in it, but I'll leave.
No, I literally really haven't got any menace for them.
No, I'm joking. Carolyn, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you're enjoying. We're trying to produce these videos on a daily basis now, and I want over the summer to be talking to some opposition MPs as well, just to give a different flavour to perhaps sometimes we normally give on some of these reaction videos. And please do subscribe on the YouTube button below. That helps us rise up the algorithm so that more people can see this video. And at the moment, if you go to the main reaction website where you can read articles and features, we're offering a free month's subscription if you leave us your email address. So please take advantage of that, and August will go much more quickly and swimmingly as a result. And Carolyn, I must send you a free subscription as a small thank you.
Oh, thank you.
You doing this for us. But until the next video, thank you for watching. Thank you, Carolyn. See you soon.